Did you know that even the kindest people, those you consider examples of virtue, can transform into something unthinkable? What makes a good, ethical, and kind person capable of committing acts of cruelty? And what if I told you that this is not a rare anomaly, but a phenomenon observed throughout history and human psychology? In today's video, we will explore the answer to this disturbing question. What leads us to commit evil? Stay until the end, because what you are about to discover may completely change the way you see the world and yourself. Today, we are going to delve into a deep and uncomfortable topic. Why do good people suddenly make unthinkable decisions? If you think this is something rare, prepare to question your beliefs. From psychological experiments to dark historical moments, powerful forces are at play that can transform even the most virtuous human being. Throughout this video, we will not only examine these forces, but also discuss how we can recognize and resist them. By the end, you will have a crucial revelation that may change your perspective. It all begins with the Lucifer effect, a concept made famous by psychologist Philip Zimbardo, known for the infamous Stanford prison experiment. What Zimbardo revealed shocked the world. The environment we are in, the social masks we wear, and the authority we obey have the power to corrupt even the purest souls. Evil is not just an isolated act, but a process that can be influenced by both external and internal factors. Let's imagine for a moment. History is full of ordinary individuals who, under certain circumstances, committed unthinkable atrocities. Guards in concentration camps, soldiers in genocides, or even those who remained silent while terror unfolded around them. None of these individuals were born evil. They were shaped by situations that revealed the dark side of their human nature. Why does this happen? The answer lies in a complex web of psychological and social forces that influence our behavior. First, let's talk about the power of authority. In the 1960s, renowned psychologist Stanley Milgram conducted obedience experiments that revealed a surprising fact. Ordinary people, when commanded by an authority figure, were willing to inflict extreme pain on others without questioning orders. In Milgram's tests, participants were instructed to administer electric shocks to a person who was actually an actor, and even when they believed they were causing severe pain, most continued to obey. This raises an important question. How often, in our own lives, do we follow orders without questioning them, whether from a superior, a leader, or even social norms? Now imagine what would happen if someone in power asked you to go against your own beliefs and values, all in the name of a greater good. What would you do? How far would you go? Another crucial factor in this transformation is dehumanization, which we will explore further. The ability to disregard the humanity of others is one of the most destructive forces that can infiltrate human behavior. When we begin to see others as something less than human, as enemies, subhumans, or simply the other, the line between right and wrong becomes blurred. This opens the door to cruelty. Have you ever stopped to think about how language, often used in social and political discourse, can create this divide between us and them? Instead of individuals, people become labels, stereotypes, or even threats. How does this affect our empathy? How do these words distort our vision and create a mentality of separation? By reducing someone to a label, it is as if we are stripping away their humanity, making it much easier to act mercilessly. Consider some of the examples we see in the media and politics, where different groups are labeled with dehumanizing terms. This not only weakens our connection with them, but reinforces the idea that we are dealing with something less than human. When that line is crossed, the damage is immense. And how do group dynamics play into this? Well, they are more powerful than you might think. In the famous Stanford prison experiment, Zimbardo observed a terrifying phenomenon. Within days, students divided into guards, and prisoners in a simulated prison began to exhibit abusive behavior and extreme submission. The most frightening part was how quickly participants lost their personal identity and fully embraced the roles imposed upon them. The question now is, to what extent are we shaped by the social roles and structures around us? Are we truly free to act as individuals? Or are we merely following a script dictated by society? These forces, such as authority and group dynamics, are not just theories. They are real and at play every day in workplaces, schools, social networks, and even within our own homes. Being aware of them is the first step in resisting. What about the critical moment? The exact point at which a good person starts crossing the line between right and wrong. Often the process is subtle. It all begins with small concessions. It's that moment when you choose to remain silent when witnessing an injustice or accept something that goes against your own values, because it is easier or safer. Over time, these small choices accumulate, creating an internal darkness that can lead to an irreversible moral failure. Have you ever stopped to think about how many times you have made a choice against your own principles to avoid confrontation or simply for convenience? What happened afterward? These moments are more common than we'd like to admit, but what can we do to avoid them? How can we recognize these signs before they turn into larger, more harmful choices? Here comes the big question. Are some people immune to the Lucifer effect? Or in other words, is there anyone who is truly not susceptible to the moral corruption this phenomenon can cause? The answer, although uncomfortable, is that all of us are vulnerable. Psychology has discussed for decades the role of personality in resisting the temptation to fall into the depths of evil. However, none of us are completely free from these forces. The line between good and evil is thinner than we imagine and can be influenced by a series of psychological and social factors. Stay with me, because in the next section we'll explore how to strengthen our resistance to these forces and how to develop a mindset that helps us act with integrity even when the pressure is high. Although certain traits, such as empathy, self-awareness, and moral courage, can serve as protective factors, the uncomfortable truth is that under the right or wrong conditions, anyone can be dragged into the abyss. Think about it. Inside each of us exists both the capacity for good and for evil. This duality is nothing new. It has been explored in literature, religion, and philosophy for centuries. Carl Jung, one of the greatest names in psychology, called this hidden side of our psyche the shadow, that repressed part full of impulses we prefer to ignore. But ignoring it doesn't make it go away. Now stop for a moment and reflect. Have you ever felt such intense anger that it scared you? Ever said something in the heat of the moment that later left you with a heavy conscience? These are manifestations of the shadow in action. If left unchecked, this repressed part can grow, strengthening until it influences actions that go against the individual's own values. And this is where the Lucifer effect gains power. But here's some good news. Awareness is our best defense. When we understand the psychological mechanisms that lead to moral collapse, we become more resistant to them. Now, how exactly does evil infiltrate daily life without people noticing? One of the most subtle and dangerous mechanisms is moral disengagement, a concept developed by renowned psychologist Albert Bandura. He explains how people find justifications for their actions, avoiding the weight of guilt or regret. Think about how this happens every day. Someone might cheat on a test, telling themselves, "It's just this once, everyone does it." A boss might exploit their employees, believing that it's necessary for the success of the company. Governments might justify cruel actions by saying, "It's for the greater good." This rationalization creates a psychological barrier between the person and the reality of what they are doing. Small ethical deviations accumulate until, without realizing it, the individual has crossed a line they never imagined they would. The antidote to this? Moral vigilance. We need to constantly question our decisions and motivations, even when it makes us uncomfortable. Asking ourselves, "Am I just making excuses for something I know is wrong?" is a powerful tool to avoid falling into this cycle. Empathy, the shield against evil. If moral disengagement takes us away from our internal compass, empathy does the opposite. It brings us closer. When we allow ourselves to see others as human beings, with emotions, fears, and dreams, it becomes much harder to treat them as objects or enemies. And this is why art, literature, and human connection are so important. They remind us of our shared humanity and break down the divisions that blind us to the suffering of others. But there's a bigger problem to face. It's not enough to resist individually. Evil doesn't just happen between people, but within entire systems. And here arises an even more alarming question. How can structures of power amplify and perpetuate the Lucifer effect? The role of leadership and collective responsibility history has shown us that charismatic leaders have the power to either elevate or completely destroy a society. And the scariest part, the real danger often isn't the leader themselves, but the collective acceptance of their ideas and the way they mobilize their followers. Dictators, Extremist movements and oppressive systems don't come out of nowhere. They grow because they find fertile ground in people's willingness to obey, to give in to social pressures, and to accept small injustices until it's too late. But courage doesn't only come in big moments. It's also tested in the small choices of daily life. When we face small injustices, office gossip, or even a moment when it's easier to ignore someone else's suffering, moral courage is built in these small choices. By refusing to compromise in smaller moments, you create a solid foundation for when bigger challenges arise. Remember, we are all leaders in different areas of our lives. It could be at work, in our community, or even in our own home. The example we set and the influence we exert can change the course of things, for better or worse. True leadership isn't just about commanding. It's about inspiring and motivating others to follow a path of compassion, justice, and humanity. You have the power to choose what kind of leader you will be, even if that's in a small context. What you do in your closest circle can have a profound impact. The final question is, how will you use your influence? These core values, like honesty, compassion, justice, and responsibility, should be more than just words. They need to be principles that guide our actions, especially in the moments when we are morally challenged. Now think about times when you faced a moral dilemma. Did you make a decision that was aligned with these values? Or did you compromise them to avoid conflict or discomfort? A practical way to prepare for these dilemmas is to visualize challenging scenarios. What would you do if you witnessed a violation at work? How would you respond if you were pressured to follow a questionable ethical direction? By mentally rehearsing these responses, you strengthen your ability to react decisively when the moment comes. Visualization is a powerful tool to ensure that you act according to your values when needed. Another fundamental strategy is to cultivate strong social connections with people who share your values. Staying surrounded by a supportive network is crucial. These relationships not only provide accountability but also help you face the pressure of conformity and negative influences that may arise. When you have people around you who encourage you to act with integrity, tough choices become a bit easier to face. Situational awareness, recognizing the context. Now, what do we do when we find ourselves in systems or environments that, by their very nature, seem designed to erode our values? This is where the concept of situational awareness comes in. It means recognizing the dynamics and pressures that influence our behavior. Often we find ourselves in situations where what is acceptable to the group or environment doesn't align with what we know to be right. Ask yourself, is this really right? Or am I just accepting it because everyone else is doing the same? Situational awareness allows us to recognize when we are being pushed into adopting questionable behaviors, often subtly and without noticing. Additionally, small acts of resistance can be extremely powerful. When we feel powerless in the face of large systemic problems, we tend to believe that our individual actions won't make a difference. But in reality, a single act of integrity can spark a wave of change. Consider the domino effect. By speaking out against unethical practices at work, you may encourage others to speak out as well, creating an environment of moral resilience. The impact of daily actions, breaking the culture of dehumanization. In a society where divisions often gain strength, our daily gestures of kindness and understanding can have a profound effect. Instead of adhering to the dehumanization that often permeates social and political discourse, we can challenge this culture through our everyday interactions. Remember, small actions, like a smile, a helping hand, or a word of support, are powerful. They can break the barriers of dehumanization and remind us that, deep down, we are all human. The philosopher Socrates said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." Constant self-reflection is the key to personal and moral growth. It allows us to recognize our own biases, identify moments when we have failed, and learn from those mistakes. Perfection is not the goal. What matters is progress. Ask yourself daily, what motivated my actions today? Did I treat others with respect and empathy? Were there moments when I remained silent when I should have spoken up? These questions help train your mind and heart to act with more intentionality and integrity. The heroic image, hope against the Lucifer effect. Now, one final reflection. Can the Lucifer effect be completely neutralized? The answer is not simple. But the truth is that while the forces shaping our behavior can be powerful, There is one key that allows us to resist these influences: the heroic imagination. As Philip Zimbardo suggested, the heroic imagination is the mindset that allows ordinary people to take extraordinary actions in the face of moral challenges. Instead of seeing heroism as something reserved for a few, the heroic imagination reminds us that we can all be heroes in decisive moments. The key is believing that our actions truly matter, that the difference can be made not only by the exceptional, but by all of us. Conclusion: the power of choice. The truth we need to understand is that we are not enslaved by the Lucifer effect. We have within us the ability to choose, to resist, to act with moral courage, and to be the kind of leader who inspires others for good. What defines us is not what happens to us, but the choices we make. By becoming aware of these forces, reflecting on our values, and cultivating moral courage and situational awareness, we can resist what pushes us toward evil. In the end, we are all responsible for the light or the darkness that we choose to allow into our lives. The real question that remains is, how will you respond? Cultivating the heroic imagination doesn't mean waiting for a grand moment to act. On the contrary, heroism manifests itself in the small choices of everyday life. This can mean standing up for someone who is being treated unjustly, helping those in need, whether through volunteering or a simple act of support, choosing compassion over indifference, especially in situations where it would be easier to ignore. Studying the lives of those who exemplified courage and integrity can remind us that these qualities are within reach for all of us. From historical figures to everyday change-makers, their stories show that the difference begins with small daily decisions. But now, we arrive at the most powerful insight of all. What is the ultimate realization that can transform not only how we see the world, but how we see ourselves within it? The line between good and evil passes through the heart of each of us. The greatest illusion we can have is believing that evil belongs only to others. The reality is much deeper and at the same time liberating. As Alexander Solzhenitsyn wrote, the line between good and evil does not separate groups of people or nations. It passes through the heart of every human being. This understanding is both humbling and empowering. Humbling because it reminds us that we all have the capacity to fail morally. Empowering because it gives us the choice to act with integrity every day. Each moment presents us with an opportunity to choose light over darkness, to resist the forces that pull us away from our values, and to contribute to a more compassionate and just world. But how can we put this into practice? How can we turn this knowledge into real action? How to apply these ideas in your life? So far, we have explored the psychological mechanisms that can lead ordinary people to commit unthinkable acts: blind authority, moral disengagement, dehumanization, and the influence of group dynamics. We have also discussed how awareness, moral courage, empathy, and self-reflection are our main defenses against these forces. Now let's focus on what you can do today to not only become resilient to the Lucifer effect, but to become an active force for good. 1. Recognize your influence. No matter how small or insignificant your role may seem, you shape the environment around you. With every conversation, every decision, every silence, or every word spoken, you are influencing the values and norms of the people around you. So ask yourself, am I helping to create an environment of empathy, justice, and responsibility? Or am I silently allowing harmful behaviors to persist? Change doesn't have to be grand to be meaningful. 2. Oskar Schindler, the impact of small acts of courage. Consider the story of Oskar Schindler, a German industrialist who lived during World War II. Initially driven by profit, he used his resources to save over 1,000 Jews from the Holocaust. What makes his story so powerful? Schindler didn't start as a hero. He wasn't a revolutionary leader or a warrior for justice. He was an ordinary man with flaws and imperfections. But when faced with the choice between staying silent or taking action, he chose to use his influence to save lives. And this is the big lesson. You don't need extraordinary circumstances to make a difference. You can impact your social circle, your workplace, your community. Impact is not reserved for a chosen few. It is available to all of us. Turn knowledge into action. You can start where you are now, in your community, at work, or within your own family. Speak up when you witness injustice. Offer support to someone who feels isolated. Challenge stereotypes and divisions that push people apart. These small acts, when multiplied, have the power to transform not just individual lives, but entire societies. Another essential step is continuous education. Knowledge is one of the most powerful tools against manipulation and moral erosion. Study history, psychology, and philosophy to better understand how and why people make the choices they do. But don't stop there. Share this knowledge, not to preach or impose opinions, but to inspire meaningful reflection and conversations. Have you ever thought about how the stories we consume shape our perceptions of right and wrong? Movies, books, and media influence our view of good and evil. By seeking out narratives that challenge your beliefs and expand your perspective, you build a more nuanced and compassionate understanding of the world. Build resilience against pressure. Choosing the path of integrity is not always easy. Often it means facing social rejection, professional consequences, or even personal losses. This is why resilience is crucial, and being resilient doesn't mean being fearless. It means continuing to act according to your values, even when fear is present. To strengthen your resilience, practice habits that promote your mental and emotional well-being. Practice mindfulness. Engage in meditation or self-awareness exercises. Keep a journal. Reflect on your decisions and what you've learned. Seek support from mentors and trusted friends. Resilience grows through connection with others. Being surrounded by a support network can make the difference between giving in to pressure or standing firm in your principles. And what about when we fail? Because inevitably, we will fail. There will be moments when fear or pressure leads us to act in ways we later regret. This is where a fundamental concept comes in: self-forgiveness. Forgiving yourself does not mean justifying mistakes, but rather acknowledging them, taking responsibility, and committing to doing better. Ask yourself, have I ever betrayed my own values? How did I react to it? Did I learn from that mistake, or did I let it define me? The ability to forgive yourself and learn is one of the most powerful tools to break cycles of failure and rebuild a path based on integrity. When we manage to forgive ourselves and others, we free ourselves from the weight of guilt and move forward with greater clarity and purpose. The greatest understanding, our interconnection. In the end, everything comes back to the deepest realization of all. Good and evil are not external forces that exist only in others. They exist within each of us. When we accept this truth, we no longer look at others with judgment, but with empathy and a commitment to healing. Think about the ripple effects of your actions. Every choice you make, no matter how small, creates waves in the world. Are you contributing to more division and pain? Or do your actions bring people closer together and inspire hope? Imagine a world where everyone takes responsibility for their choices, where we resist dehumanization and polarization, and strive to create environments based on compassion and integrity. This is not an unattainable ideal. It is a reality we can build, one step at a time. The final challenge. Now that we have reached the end of this journey, I leave you with a final challenge. Reflect on what you have learned today. Ask yourself, how can I apply these principles in my life? How can I recognize and resist the forces that try to pull me away from my values? What can I do to contribute to a world where kindness overcomes darkness? These questions do not have easy answers, but they are worth pursuing. Because in the end, the battle between good and evil does not take place on distant battlefields or in abstract theories. It happens within each of us, every single day. So, the next time you face a moral choice, remember this: you have the power to choose. You have the power to resist. You have the power to be a force for good in a world that desperately needs it. The question is, will you accept this challenge? Thank you for watching.